Hey folks, how's it going? So today we are looking at the Esse Quadro L'una 177 speakers from Italy. And these are no ordinary speakers. These are quite up there in terms of price range. They are $7,250 USD and closing in around $10,000 Canadian. So they are pricey and they're up there in terms of price. And they are big bookshelf speakers compared to other bookshelf speakers that we saw on this channel. For example, take the KEf R3s, the Buchardt S400, Special Dynaudio 40, and so on and so forth. It's a lot bigger than what we are normally used to. So there's a few questions that I want to answer as I go into this review. And that is, first, if we're gonna get a bookshelf this size, then what is the purpose of a floor stander? How does it compete with a floor stander? I mean, if you're gonna get a bookshelf this expensive, should you get a floor stander instead? We're gonna cover that topic, and I think that's very important. The second topic we're gonna cover is basically, what do you get when you go from something like a 2,000, 3,000 bookshelf speaker, let's say the KEf R3, Buchardt S400, and Dynaudio Special 40, and what do you get when you go from those kind of speakers to something 2 to 3 times the price point, like the Esse Quadro? So these are some of the stuff that we are going to cover in this review. Now, looking at Esse Quadro, this is not a brand that a lot of people know. Now, this brand was started by an engineer named Salvatore. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I'm not Italian, so bear with me. This is all handmade with very little machine work. And so that is very impressive to say the least. I mean, I just can't imagine myself, and I've done DIY speakers before, and I've tried to make my own speakers before. It is a very, very demanding task. And especially with little machine as possible, all hand built, that is fascinating. That's a lot of time that goes into building a speaker. And this is custom ordered, this is not mass produced, so every time someone orders, it is made to order. So it's like you're paying the person for their time and effort into designing and crafting the speaker each time it's ordered. And in terms of drivers, they use ScanSpeak drivers. So they're using very high quality components overall with very good construction, very good design, and so on and so forth. Now, talking about a little bit about placement. Now, as you can see here, you have a tweeter that is tilted to one side. And I thought, okay, what if I switch the speakers and kind of have the tweeters on the outside instead of the inside, just like what I did with the Magnum pans. And I found that didn't sound as good as having the tweeters on the inside for whatever reason. Now there's a whole reason behind this and so on and so forth. There's many reasons, many speculations, but all I'm gonna say is this: it sounds better on the inside, and at least in my room. I say, if you have the speakers, play around with it and see what works for you. And it is high quality. It speaks Italian, and I love leather. And I think you guys get that because I wear leather jackets all the time, except today I didn't choose to for some reason, because it's very hot in my room for some reason today. But anyways, getting back into this, the Esse Quadro doesn't use any PCB in the crossover. In fact, they use very high quality caps and I believe Jensen caps. And the engineer, Salvatore, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, I swear, he all hand wires them point to point. So he believes that PCB actually degrades sound and that he gets better sound when he hand wires them point to point. And so I found that to be very interesting, and certainly the sound speaks for itself, and we're gonna get into that. So what you see here is basically 3 speakers: the KEf R3, Buchardt S400, and the Dynaudio Special 40. And what I did was I did a straight 4 to 6 hour listen with the same components, A being versus the Esse Quadro and the speakers. And you may be thinking, well, why the hell would you do that? Because, I mean, think about it. These are 2 to 3 grand speakers you're comparing to a 7,250 USD speaker. What sense does that make? Of course, this is going to be better. Yes, but I also wanted to get that across where people are saying there's a diminishing return. And this is true. There's diminishing return everywhere. I mean, if I go from a $1,000 watch to a $10,000 watch, it's still probably exactly the same, except, maybe one tracks better than the other by a few milliseconds or something like that, right? I'm not really a 100% a watch guy myself. I like watches, but I'm not like a collector or like, I don't know the technical things behind it. But with that being said, I mean, it's very, very minute differences. I'm a camera guy, so let me explain the camera way. It's like going from a $800 or $1,000 or even $2,000 camera to a $10,000 camera. The differences are going to be minute. It may help you with your workflow a little bit better. It may have a little bit better function. It may even have a slightly better photo quality or video quality. But at the end of the day, the cost is a diminishing return, right? So that's true in all industry. It's not just audio. So let's stop crying over that, okay? These speakers, in my opinion, are 2 to 3 times better, however. And the reason is very simple. In my test, I did not expect this. When I was switching back and forth between the Buchardt S400, the KEf R3, and the Dynaudio Special 40, I made individual notes. And the notes went somewhere along the lines of, the bass is punchier, the texture is better, the soundstage is larger, the imaging is more pinpoint, everything is more clear, everything is darker in the background. And at the end of the day, I saw my notes and I said, okay, this is ridiculous. This is basically saying the Esse Quadro destroys the Buchardt S400, the KEf R3, and the Dynaudio Special 40 in every way possible. And I thought that to be very interesting. Now I'm gonna outline the basic sound differences. I think I'm gonna go with the Buchardt S400. With the Buchardt S400, for example, when I was listening to a track like by Sophie Tucker, it's called Deja Vu Affair. This track is particularly interesting because it has a section of the music where, in the very beginning, where there's a bass note, a mid-bass note that goes boom, 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 boom. Now, while the Buchardt S400 was punching as loud in terms of loudness as the Esse Quadro at a matched volume, I found that the Buchardt S400 had a more rounder, a little bit fluffier bass compared to the Esse Quadro. Now, before I found the Buchardt S400 to be a very tight type of speaker when it came to the mid-bass, and I still stand by that. Just that the Esse Quadro takes it to a whole different level of punchiness. In fact, on certain tracks, it hurt my chest. Just the sheer amount of punchiness these speakers have is just insane. So if you are looking for something very dynamic with a lot of bass extension and oomph, these speakers are fantastic speakers and definitely an upgrade from, let's say, the Buchardt S400 or the KEf R3 or even this Dynaudio Special 40. And there's no, simple way to put it. It is an upgrade in terms of bass. Now, talking about mid-range. Now, in terms of mid-range, you're going to have a darker background. You're going to have a sense of more depth and scale and resolution. And so, for example, when I was listening to a track Lip by Annette, I forget her name all the time, but it's called Liberty. And this track displays a particular quality that I listen for, and that is basically her lip smacks. And this lip smack is very, very apparent on certain speakers and is not on other speakers. Now, when it comes to the balance between her lip smack and just getting to that sibilance and so forth, it is very hard to maintain that balance. I've rarely heard speakers do it very well. The chances are, if I'm hearing her lip smack, it's gonna be towards the sibilant side. Whereas if I don't hear her lip smack, it tends to be on the warmer side of the spectrum. With these speakers, immediately I heard her lip smack, just beautiful lip smack, and I thought, okay, it's gonna get bright, but it didn't. These speakers actually displayed every detail and nuance in the music without giving me any type of shrill presentation. Now we're gonna talk about amplification here just for a quick little bit, because in the beginning of my initial impression, even my girlfriend mentioned that these speakers are not very forgiving, they're harsh, and I mean, they can be harsh and so on and so forth. And this is not true. Now, this is only true if you're pairing them with something that can't drive these speakers. So for example, we had them hooked up to the Heaven 11 Billy-amp. And while the Billy-amp is an incredible amplifier and it's coming up for review, I really love it. At the same time, it just didn't have enough power and juice to drive these speakers. So when you're strained for power, when you're strained and the matching is not that great, then you are going to get that kind of sibilance and you're going to get strained type of sound. And you may find these speakers unforgiving when you have the wrong amplification. Now, what kind of amplification I found it to be perfect with these speakers is in fact Hagel. And I know you guys are going to be like, oh my god, stop with the Hagel rave. But I really love Hagel. They're freaking fantastic, simple to use, and so on and so forth. For those of you who don't know, this is an all-in-one streamer, amplifier, preamplifier, and so on and so forth. And only 75 watts per side, but it seems like it has a lot more. So I'm assuming it's high current. The damping factor on this is incredible. And what damping factor is basically, simply put, the ability to control the woofers on your speakers. So I found this to be incredible, an incredible match. Now, quite frankly, though, compared to these speakers, one thing that Buchardt S400 may actually be in favor of a lot of listeners is the amount of smoothness it portrays. So for example, if I'm listening to some very poor recording, yes, the Esse Quadro does it perfectly fine. I was very surprised to find that. Matched with the Hagel, even matched with the Shinai, which is a $20,000 amplifier, integrated amplifier from Grand Note that I have here in for review. I found the match to be just absolutely stunning and fascinating. And even through YouTube and some poor recordings, I just found it to be just perfectly forgiving and enjoyable for the most part. Now, unless you play an absolute trash track on it, that's just poorly recorded to the your highest imagination, you're gonna get a pretty decent sound out of it at all times. And that's the beauty of these speakers. Quite frankly, I get a lot of speakers in the $10,000, $20,000 range that just sounds absolutely crap with a lot of the modern music and poorly recorded tracks. And at that point, I'm thinking to myself, what is the point? If I can't listen to the music that I enjoy, whether it's in poor quality or high quality, of course I will try to play high quality where I can, but some music's just not available in high quality. Like some of the songs that my mom plays are only available on YouTube because it was never published. Like it was never made into a CD or vinyl, and it was like a concert or something like that. So now I'm rambling on, but at the end of the day, the point is that the Buchardt S400 is a little bit more forgiving in that regard compared to the Esse Quadro, and that's where you may actually prefer the Buchardt S400. Now, quite frankly, that's interesting because it's a $2,000 speaker compared to a $7,250 speaker, and it wins in one regard. Now, looking at the high frequency and so on and so forth, the extension is just opens up. Compared to the Buchardt S400, the high frequency just opens up. And it's that kind of experience where, I have to really explain it this way. It's that kind of experience where it's your first hi-fi experience. You listen to your first speakers, and we all have that experience where we're like, oh my god, what have I been listening to? Was I deaf? Like, this is incredible. That kind of experience, right? We all had that audiophile moment. We all had that moment in our lives where we said, wow, this is amazing. And that's what you really get out of these speakers when you go from a $2,000 to $3,000 speaker to something like this. It's like an eye-opening experience. And I still remember when I first walked into a hi-fi, high-end audio store that I work at currently, and I thought to myself, holy crap, what have I been listening to? All these, budget gear is totally different from these high-end gear. And of course, given the price point, that was a given. But it took me a time and a lot of effort into diving into actually justifying and saying, oh my god, okay, so it does this better. And yes, it justifies in this way. And it was hard to wrap my head around. But this is a lot more like a no-brainer in that regard. Because when I really look at it, at least to me, it is definitely worth 2 to 3 times better, because it's better in like 99% of, all aspects. And looking at my notes, I was shocked at this fact. In fact, when I was playing, a few tracks by Dire Straits, Leonard Cohen, and all these stuff like Darker Than Black, that's a very good track that I think is called I Like It Darker. Yeah, not Darker Than Black. What am I saying? That's a movie show, I think, on Netflix or something like that. But anyways, when I was listening to I Like It Darker by Leonard Cohen, just a sheer amount of gut and detail in his voice was just outstanding on these speakers. So all I'm saying is, paired up with the right gear, having a good synergy system with the Esse Quadro brings it to a whole another level of enjoyment and experience compared to something that we're maybe more used to, around 2 to 3 grand. And I understand, not everyone can afford this, and I agree, I can't afford this either. So there's that. But what I think is important is to be able to appreciate that something like this exists. And something like this is definitely something that you should consider as an upgrade. And there's also always like room for upgrade. There's always room to reach for higher. And I think that realizing that there's no boundary in terms of how far you can go in audio is the beauty of it. Yes, sometimes it can be frustrating, and I think it is, that's part of the journey. Everything is frustrating, sometimes, and I think that's good. A certain amount of frustration, I think, is good, is all I'm saying. Now, the Esse Quadro also has a dip switch on the back, and the dip switch is basically a adjustment for your room. I never really needed to use this, but I did experiment with it. I left it at flat at the end of the day because that's what I preferred in my room. So you may play around with it depending on how damped or how sibilant your room is. And I think that's great because not a lot of people can have acoustic panels around, and this is really designed to go in any room, small to medium size, and just perform. Heck, I think they can perform in a large room with a Hagel, maybe H190. I have an H190 in just now. I just quickly hooked it up and I thought it was great. Just fascinating, just a lot more gut to the sound compared to the H120 that I've been playing around with. Now, one thing I need to add is that they do come with a stand that's worth about $1,500. They're not sold for separately for $1,500, but to get a stand like this, of this quality in the high-end market, is probably around $1,500 from my experience. But these speaker stands are specifically made for the Esse Quadro L'una 177. And I found that to be very interesting because not a lot of speakers, have dedicated stands that come with the speaker. And that's the type of experience you're gonna get when you go into a market like this. They're gonna be more all-in-one solution for you. And that they are very much around neutral, a little bit on the warmer side of neutral, and that they are an excellent performer in all regards. Including low listening levels. Low listening levels are just fantastic, and it blows everything I've just said, the KEf R3, Buchardt S400, Dynaudio Special 40, out of the water, no problem. So one thing that I do want to mention is that out of these 3 speakers, like the KEf R3, the Buchardt S400, and the Dynaudio Special 40, I found the KEf R3 paired up with Hagel, as you guys probably may know, is a heavenly match. So I was very, and KEf R3 is the biggest speaker out of all 3 speakers that we have here for comparison. So KEf R3 is slightly smaller than the Esse Quadro. And so I thought, okay, maybe if I pair the Hagel with the KEf R3, maybe we'll get close to the Esse Quadro. And yes, it got pretty darn close, maybe around 80%. But still, Esse Quadro with Hagel was miles better. Is that 20% extra resolution, bass oomph, and sense of depth improvement better than the KEf R3? Like the the texture, the overall presentation, the tonality was so much more pleasing and inviting to me on the Esse Quadro that I very much thought, yeah, this is something that, is worth mentioning. And yeah, was very impressive, don't get me wrong, that the KEf R3 was able to perform at 80% of what the Esse Quadro was able to do with Hegel, at the very least. But what really happened that took it for me was that when I hooked the Esse Quadro and the KEf R3 to my Grandinal Shinai amplifier, which is a $20,000 amplifier, there was no comparison. The Esse Quadro was just leaps and leaps above the KEf R3 in terms of performance. So I thought maybe the KEf R3 is not a good match with the Grandinal Shinai. Maybe I should have the Hegel H190 hooked up to the KEf R3 and the Grandinal Shinai hooked up to the Esse Quadro. And even then, I found that the resolution, the resolute, was leaps and leaps better on the Esse Quadro in this case. So when paired up with higher end gear, as it should with the Esse Quadro, there's a lot of room for improvement, and it really comes through. So I can just imagine that the Esse Quadro is, very much a good match with higher end components, which I can't really try a lot in my current space. But with what I had, which was the Grandinal Shinai, it just sounded absolutely ridiculous. Like it blew everything in the studio out of the water. And of course, that's like a $30,000 system right there and then without the DAC into the equation. So of course, you're gonna say, of course it should. But I'm saying, I hear a lot of systems that's like 100,000, 200,000, and the match between the Shinai and the Esse Quadro was just absolutely ridiculous. That's all I'm gonna say. Like the high frequency extension, the resolution, the texture, the voices was holographic, stretching out of the room, and it was an experience to really, appreciate. So now we're going into why a speaker like this is viable compared to a floor standard. I mean, if you're gonna spend 7,250 USD on a speaker, shouldn't you get a floor standard? What sense does it make to get a bookshelf that costs this much? And let me say this. Yes, they are gonna take the exact same amount of space if you get a floor standard. And yes, the floor standard is gonna sound bigger and perhaps may have more bass, more grand sound. But the Esse Quadro sounds absolutely like a floor standard. This is just a bookshelf on a stand as it appears. But visually, that's what I see. But sonically, that's not what I hear. Sonically, what I hear is very much a floor standard. The cabinets are heavy. It is designed very well. The stands are heavy duty, and heck, you can fill them in with sand to fine tune the bass. And guess what? Because these are a bookshelf speaker, you're gonna get that pinpoint imaging and that grand sound stage that you're expecting from a bookshelf speaker. And that's exactly why you get a high-end bookshelf speaker, because they image well and do things that a floor standard can't do at the same price point. Now, obviously, if you go into a higher price point of floor standard, that's a different story. But looking at it, let's say you get a $7,250 floor standard versus a bookshelf that's $7,250. The differences are going to be that generally speaking, on grand scheme of things, based on my experience, is that the floor standard is gonna perhaps sound bigger, have more bass, but they're not gonna image as well. They may project more, but they're not gonna image or soundstage as well. So all I'm saying is, in the grand scheme of things, there's definitely a interest when it comes to why a person wants a bookshelf speaker. And one of the biggest factors that I think I'm leaving out here that I should really include is that some people just don't have room, and a lot of us don't, and we want something that's able to fit into a small or medium-sized room. And these does it perfectly without being too fudgety about the placement. So I think that's basically all I have to really cover. I think these are fantastic speakers. By all means, I think they're fantastic speakers. Now, you can check the description below for the contact information for the distributor in Canada. They're all custom orders, so you have to go through that contact and so on and so forth to find the dealer that carries these and so on and so forth. But I found these to be exceptional, just exceptional speakers. So there you have it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.